Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
James believed that loving someone meant giving himself completely. From the very beginning of their relationship, he made a point of showing this in every little detail. He was always there for her, helpful, willing to understand their differences and smooth over any conflicts. When he met Brooke, she seemed unlike anyone he had ever been with before. She had a very intense way of connecting, always paying close attention to everything he said and did. In those first few weeks, that level of devotion felt rare. She remembered dates, conversations, his preferences, as though she were writing everything down in an invisible notebook. James was captivated by that. What he didn't realize was that this attention also came loaded with control. The first time she asked for his phone password was with a smile, saying it was just to make a restaurant reservation. When he asked if it wouldn't be easier for her to just call directly, she answered sweetly, "You trust me, right?" And he did trust her. The second time, she said she wanted to check if the Uber had arrived, and again she accessed his phone like it was no big deal. Little by little, it became routine. Brooke started grabbing his phone while he was in the shower, checking notifications, opening social media, scanning conversations like she was searching for something hidden, even without any real reason. Months went by, and James and Brooke got married in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard, surrounded by close friends and promises of a forever that felt unshakable. But behind the smiles and their intertwined hands, there was a love suffocated by distrust and a heavy silence that James was slowly learning to carry. James never had anything to hide. He was a career-driven man who liked routine and valued loyalty. He worked as a project manager at a tech company, so he was in meetings all the time, messaging coworkers, and dealing with clients of all types. When Brooke found out there were women on his team, she showed her discomfort, masking it as a joke. One time, during dinner, she quietly said, "It's funny how you talk more to Rachel on your team than you do to me these days." He laughed, trying to ease the mood, but she didn't laugh back. Over time, small situations started to blow up into huge issues. A simple like on the photo of an old college classmate turned into 2 days of silent treatment. Brooke wouldn't speak, she'd just lock herself in the bedroom and cry until he apologized. It didn't matter if he hadn't done anything wrong, her discomfort alone was enough to create tension. Their home, once welcoming and light, turned into a constant testing ground. Every step, every comment, every message had to be explained. He tried to keep calm. He patiently explained, showed her his phone screen, gave her his call history. But it was never enough. She began to rummage through his pants pockets before doing laundry. If she found a restaurant receipt, she'd demand to know who he was with, even if it was a team lunch. She started creating theories about his schedule, questioning if he took 3 minutes longer than usual to answer a text, and saying things like, "If it were me, I'd reply right away." Exhausted from fighting, James began to justify himself even before she asked. He took photos of the conference room, sent quick videos showing where he was, as if that could somehow calm her suspicions. One night, Brooke woke up in the middle of the night, turned on the light, and said she'd dreamed he was cheating on her. James barely had time to figure out what was going on before she was already crying, saying it could be a sign that she needed to know the truth. He held her, trying to calm her down, repeating that he would never do that, that she was the only woman he wanted to be with. And he meant it. But it seemed like nothing he did could fill the hole of insecurity she carried inside. James's closest friends noticed he was quieter, more reserved. He stopped attending company barbecues, turned down invitations to social events, and even avoided video calls with coworkers, afraid Brooke would misinterpret something. In one of those virtual meetings, a female colleague appeared in the background to say good night to the group, and Brooke showed up out of nowhere, slamming the office door and accusing James of hiding conversations. That night, he slept on the couch. Even so, he kept trying to maintain harmony. He told himself it was just a phase, that she needed reassurance, more convincing gestures of love. He thought her jealousy came from a fear of losing him, so he accepted living in a way that gave her peace of mind. He agreed to delete women friends from social media, stopped following people she considered threatening, and changed his outfit whenever she said he was dressing up too much to go out alone. Every day, before leaving for work, he left his phone unlocked on the table to show her he had nothing to hide. At night, he always came home at the same time, called on the way, sent pictures of the traffic. It was as if he'd gotten stuck in a loop where love and watchfulness walked hand in hand, but only on one side. And the more he adapted, the tighter her hold became. Even visits to his mother turned into a source of tension. Brooke wanted to know what they talked about, why he spent so much time there, and if his mom was filling his head with nonsense. James felt the weight on his shoulders, but he didn't complain. He was so wrapped up in trying to keep their relationship going that he forgot to look out for himself. The James he used to be, light-hearted, sociable, confident, seemed more and more distant. All that was left was a worn-out man who lived as though every action had to be explained, every word filtered, every smile monitored. What he still didn't know was that behind all that control, there was a hidden shadow. And it wasn't just in her past. It was alive, real, and about to be revealed in the worst way possible. James had always paid attention to little details, the kind of man who notices subtle changes in things and people. For 3 days straight, James noticed the same car parked out front of the building where he worked. From his office on the 4th floor, he had a clear view of the street. He always paid attention to what was going on outside, not out of suspicion, but out of habit. His window was right behind his desk, and while he was answering emails or reviewing reports, his eyes would drift sometimes to the sidewalk below. It was just a normal street, with shops, cafes, and cars coming and going. But this vehicle stuck out. A black sedan with dark windows, always in the same spot, just sitting there for hours. At first, it seemed like a minor detail, but it started to occupy his thoughts. On the morning of the 4th day, he paid closer attention. 2 minutes after he sat down at his desk, the car was there again. The driver's window was slightly open, and someone was inside. He couldn't see the person's face, just a shadowy figure sitting still, like they were watching something. A strange feeling came over James. This was more than coincidence. He got up to grab a mug of coffee in the office kitchenette and glanced back at the window, pretending not to be suspicious. The car was still there, and whoever was inside wasn't moving. It went on like that for hours. When James went out for lunch, he decided to walk closer. He crossed the street with a purposeful stride, acting like he was on the phone, and checked out the car from the corner of his eye. That's when he glimpsed someone quickly ducking behind a huge pair of sunglasses. Along with them was obviously fake blonde hair that barely concealed dark roots. James's heart pounded. That wig. That posture. This couldn't be happening. He turned around and went back inside without a word. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, hoping the movement would help him process what he'd just seen. He stepped into his office, closed the door, and looked out the window again. A few minutes later, he saw the car start its engine and drive off down the avenue, disappearing among the other vehicles. Standing there in the middle of the office, James tried to make sense of it. Brooke had said she would spend the morning at the salon, that she had an appointment to get her nails done. Was the salon located exactly in a car parked outside his building? This was no longer a hunch. It was confirmation. That night, when he got home, he found Brooke on the couch, laughing at something on her phone. Her hair, now without the wig, was tied up in a haphazard bun. James watched her for a few seconds before greeting her. She smiled and waved him over, talking about the latest episode of the show they were watching. He sat down. Gave short replies, pretended to care. Inside, he felt like everything was on hold. He didn't want to argue, not then. He needed to understand why. What drove her to do something like that? How could a woman who claimed to love him so much spy on him like that, with such composure? James barely slept that night, replaying the past few days over and over in his mind, trying to notice the signs he'd missed. The next day, before leaving, he casually asked if she was still going to that new salon downtown. Brooke said yes, but there was a forced ring to her voice, like she'd just made it up. She said she'd come home late because she was meeting a friend for coffee. James didn't question it. He smiled, gave her a quick kiss, and left. As soon as he got to work, he went straight to the window. 27 minutes later, there was the car again, parked in the same spot, same posture, same lookout. Now he was sure, Brooke was there for him. She was watching him. For days, maybe even weeks. Watching his every move, like she was hoping to catch him doing something, trying to prove a betrayal that never happened. It became a pattern. James started recording the times, noticing the routine. Brooke would vanish for hours, and shortly after, the car would show up on the street outside his building. He saw her 2 more times, once with her head down like she was crying, another time reading something on her phone while looking up, as though waiting for him to appear at the window. But James never showed himself. He watched everything from a distance. Each scene revealed the truth without a single word. The woman who claimed to be so afraid of being cheated on was the same one creating her own twisted story in her head, destroying what had once been genuine love. James stopped trying to explain anything. He started collecting evidence. And deep inside, a realization began to take shape: when someone watches you that closely, they might be hiding something of their own. James was worn out. That silent watch from the street outside his office had become a symbol of everything his marriage had turned into, a war disguised as everyday life. Every morning, he arrived at work and automatically looked out the window, as if expecting to see that car, as if he'd accepted that presence as part of his new normal. And the worst part was knowing exactly who was behind the wheel. Confirming that Brooke was the one following him made something inside him break. There was no room left for excuses. She was there, in disguise, sitting in a car for hours, all so she could control someone who had always been loyal. This wasn't just jealousy anymore, it was control, obsession. And James couldn't pretend everything was fine. That Friday, the car showed up again. It parked right at 9:20 in the morning and stayed there, unmoving. James tried to ignore it all day, but the stress was too much for him to hide. He worked poorly, messed up simple numbers, missed deadlines he could normally handle easily. His mind wasn't in the game. The feeling of being under constant watch was draining him. His stomach twisted, his shoulders felt heavy. He'd glance at the car and feel anger, exhaustion, frustration. He wondered how many times she'd done this before, how many days she'd spent there, how much of his life she'd turned into her own personal show. In the middle of the afternoon, the car finally left. James watched it disappear around the corner. He stayed there for another half hour, eyes fixed on that empty spot. Its departure meant something different this time. Something clicked inside him. He stood up, grabbed his bag, and left the office without explaining. He took the stairs, got in his car, and decided to go home. Something in him was screaming. He no longer had doubts, he'd made a decision. He needed to talk to Brooke, look her in the eyes, and break the cycle. He was willing to listen, but also ready to say everything he'd been holding back. The drive home felt faster than usual. There wasn't much traffic, but his mind was on a totally different wavelength. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they needed to. When he pulled into the garage, he spent a few seconds inside his car, taking deep breaths and planning out what to say. He climbed the stairs with firm steps, turned the key, and walked in. The house was quiet. He set his keys on the counter and called her name. Nothing. He went to the bedroom, and the moment he opened the door, he heard the shower running. Brooke was in the bath. Her phone was on the bed, vibrating non-stop. 3 messages. 4. 6. The screen kept lighting up. James looked at her phone. It was an older model, the same one, with a floral case. The name on all the notifications was the same, Trevor. It felt like a punch in the stomach. He found himself picking it up almost by reflex. He unlocked it easily. Brooke always claimed she had nothing to hide, and used a predictable password. When he opened the conversation, he felt his entire body freeze. The messages left no room for doubt. "I miss our last weekend together," said one. "Let me know when he leaves the house again." "I want to see you," said another. There were photos scattered between these lines. Selfies of Brooke in a hotel room, posing in suggestive ways. One of them showed her wearing the same lingerie James had complimented her on recently, thinking it was for him. These messages spanned multiple weeks. Some arranged meetups she'd explained away as work trips. Others talked about plans for future holidays, places she and James had never visited together. In one audio clip, Brooke's voice whispered things James had never heard her say, not even in their best times. The tone, the style, the light laugh at the end. It was like there was a completely different woman on the other end of the phone, living another life while accusing him daily of cheating, disrespect, and apathy. James sat there, holding the phone, listening to the shower still running. The water splashed like it was washing away years of lies. He didn't yell. He didn't barge into the bathroom. He just sank down on the edge of the bed, staring at the screen, reading it all again. The pain came in waves, but along with it came a strange calm. He suddenly knew he wasn't the problem. He never had been. The woman he had loved with everything he had, the one he tried to protect even when she hurt him with suspicion and accusations, was the same woman who had been feeding this charade all along. Brooke came out of the shower minutes later, wrapped in a towel, shocked to see him home so early. James looked at her like it was the last time he would ever see her. And with the calm of someone who's tired of suffering in silence, he stood up, handed her the phone, and simply said, "You really picked the wrong person to distrust." She froze. Her eyes went wide, water still dripping from her hair, the towel sliding off her shoulder. James walked across the hall, down the stairs, and out the front door without looking back or saying another word. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer a person can give. James just wanted to move on. After everything he found on her phone, after all the times he kept quiet, kept bending over backward to preserve something that was rotten at its core, all he wanted was peace. He asked for a divorce politely, handing her the papers firmly and calmly, without threats or shouting. Brooke read them, tore them up in front of him, and said she would never sign. That if he really wanted to leave, he'd have to go through a messy legal battle. James just picked up the torn pieces, turned around, and left. He thought that would be their last moment together, but it wasn't. A few days later, she showed up at his workplace reception area, yelling his name in the lobby, arguing with the receptionist, demanding to see him. Embarrassed, James had to ask security for help. That was the first scene. The next day, she called his office phone 32 times. She left strange voicemails on his secretary's line, used different numbers, created fake profiles to email him at work. When that got blocked, she started showing up in person. She'd sit outside the building, drinking from a water bottle, staring at everyone going in and out. Some co-workers began to comment, thinking maybe she was a former employee with issues, but James knew. This was stalking. The same pattern as before, control, cornering, manipulation, just from the outside now. He filed a restraining order. He showed evidence, text messages, records, logs. The court granted it quickly, ordering her to keep her distance, to stop contacting him, and to stay away from his workplace. Brooke pretended to comply. She disappeared for 2 days, then came back. She sent messages through mutual friends, wrote letters, and left them with the doorman, called using her cousin's company line while pretending to be someone else. The following week, she spent the entire day parked across the street, in a car with tinted windows and the engine running, just like the old days when she used to spy on him in disguise. James saw it all from the office window, feeling a tightness in his chest, not longing, but exhaustion. This wasn't love. It never was. What finally broke him was when Brooke approached his mother at the grocery store. She tried to act like nothing had happened, attempting to make her own version of the story sound reasonable. James's mother left in tears. That was the last straw. James realized he had already put up with far too much. He quit his job, bought a one-way ticket, and moved to another city. He took only the essentials, starting over from scratch, but feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time, relief. The new city felt like a breath of fresh air. A small, quiet apartment near the company that had relocated him. A new position, new people, a new life. He was gradually going back to being who he used to be. The first month, he still woke up fearful of phone notifications, still caught himself looking over his shoulder when he went out, but soon he realized things were different. Nobody judged him here, nobody knew about his past. Slowly, he picked up old habits he'd left behind, listening to music without headphones, smiling at strangers, enjoying coffee in peace without someone texting him for his location. He was finally free. One afternoon, after work, James stayed at the office a bit longer, finishing a presentation. When he got up to grab some coffee, he passed by the window and stopped. He looked once, then twice. Across the street was a black car, parked the same way he'd seen before, dark windows, engine running. The driver didn't get out. James stood there, motionless. His chest tightened. The quiet moment was screaming at him like an old memory. For a second, everything he'd been through rushed back at him, the yelling, the texts, the accusations, the fake tears. The car didn't move. He kept staring. No expression, no reaction, just standing there, facing what could be a total coincidence, or the start of it all over again. James stayed still for a few seconds, his eyes glued to that black car on the other side of the street, the engine still running, dark windows, the same pattern as always. As much as he tried to tell himself it could be anyone, something inside him knew better. This wasn't a coincidence. He grabbed his phone with a steady hand, dialed the police, and calmly explained the situation. There was a restraining order in place, and he believed his ex-wife was violating it again. He gave the address, described the car, provided all the details. The dispatcher confirmed a patrol car would be sent right away. James hung up and returned to the window. 20 minutes later, he saw the officers arrive. One of them tapped on the driver's window. The driver hesitated, then lowered the window. There was no doubt. It was Brooke. He watched the scene unfold with a mix of relief and sadness. She tried to explain, gesturing wildly, pointing at the building like she was trying to flip the script again. But the officers already had a copy of the protective order. Within minutes, she was taken out of the car and handcuffed. James saw it all from a distance, without leaving his office, his face emotionless. When the police cruiser pulled away with Brooke inside, he took a deep breath for the first time all day. He closed the blinds, walked back to his desk, saved the file he'd been working on, and shut down the computer. That story was finally over. No shouting, no spectacle, just justice, and the certainty that sometimes choosing your own peace means staying strong right to the end. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.